Hi. Today we're going to be talking about two lines in St. Francis of Assisi's poem, "Make Me an Instrument of Your Peace." St. Francis of Assisi was a Catholic saint who lived in the 12th to the 13th centuries. The author of the prayer is unknown. It was not ascribed, I didn't know this, it was not ascribed to St. Francis until the 1920s. And by one account, the prayer was found in 1915 in Normandy, written on the back of a card of St. Francis. So we really don't know who the author is. I thought that was kind of interesting. The phrase, "make me an instrument of your peace," expresses a deep desire to be a channel or vessel through which peace can be brought, into the world. It's a deep desire to bring heaven to earth. Just going to read the poem. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, and Patricia probably gave you background last week. But Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. So beautiful. This week I read a couple of books on St. Francis, and I thought it was really interesting to notice where spiritual teachers and writers come from, because they share their perspective, which is all any of us could ever share. We can't share anything other than our perspective, just like we can't give what we don't have to give. And I read a book by Ken Nurburg, Make me an Instrument of Your Peace, Living in the Spirit of the Prayer of St. Francis. And he tells a story when he spent time in a Benedictine monastery. He was working on sculpting a statue there. And he said the monks were good and holy men, but he found himself growing increasingly unhappy with what he perceived to be their harshness of heart and lack of empathy and compassion for the suffering in the world around him. So he was annoyed by what he was seeing with the monks. And then the monks said, "Let others minister to the needs of the body. It is our spiritual mission to focus on the needs of the soul." They were playing their part in the great symphony of God. And I think that's so interesting, because we're not all here to play the same instrument. And Ken Newberg had mentioned that his father worked with Red Cross, and when Ken was a young boy, he would go with his father to tend to the needs of people in distress. And he also had many stories in the book where he found himself in extreme situations helping people. And I thought, I wonder what he's doing today. When you read a book, it's like, what's he doing today? So I looked it up and Googled him, and his son now is carrying on his work. And he is going into the world, and he was very proud of who his son had become, helping lots of people. And I thought, that's really interesting. I mean, it's like that is their spiritual contribution. That's kind of the world that they grew up in. And then I started thinking about St. Francis and his commitment to simplicity and poverty. And then I wondered, if the reason he valued poverty was in reaction to his family's wealth, because he didn't agree with what his family represented. He renounced his father and wealth. He says he took off all his clothes, folded them up, gave them to his father, and said, "From now on, I'm only going to say, 'Our Father in heaven,' He separated himself from his life of his father, and he lived the life of a poor person. And that got me thinking about, I used to teach a lot of money classes, and I thought it was interesting because typically there was an exercise we did, but we either do money exactly like our parents or we rebel and do the exact opposite. Like when I was growing up, my dad would always say, save 10%. It was like, I'm not going to let him control me. I'm not going to save 10%. So then we do the opposite, we rebel. But really what we're wanting to find, thinking about the money piece, it's like, what is your authentic relationship with money? Not the rules you grew up with and not rebelling against the rules, but what is your relationship with money? And our spiritual journey is the same way. We may have grown up with certain rules, we may be rebelling against those rules, but you really want to find is, what is my authentic relationship with God? Who am I here to be? Fillmore, in his book Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, in his book on prosperity, he said, it's a sin to be poor. That's a very different perspective from St. Francis, who believed that living a life of poverty brought one closer to God and allowed for a greater reliance on divine providence. It reminded me of a friend of mine once. She was talking about her health, and I asked her if she felt that when she was sick, she was closer to God. And she said yes. And then I was thinking, Christian Science teaches sickness is fundamentally a result of misperception and a lack of understanding of the true nature of God and reality. So that's a very different perspective. One is that illness brings you closer to God, and the other one is if you're ill, you're far away from God. So, it's not a judgment thing. It's just really interesting to start to look, what is your relationship on your spiritual journey? What's true for you? That difference, like I said about the illness, is the same as St. Francis seeing poverty as a virtue and Charles Fillmore seeing poverty as a sin. It can be common to obey or rebel the spiritual upbringing we grew up in instead of exploring and owning our relationship with God. It's the whole thing, we should give more, like we hear something, I should be like them. That's spiritual expression. That's what I should be doing, instead of really knowing the gift that you are and how God wants to express through you. I bring this up because it's easy to feel that we should be more like St. Francis, Mother Teresa, Charles Fillmore, yet your relationship to God, as well as your life expression, is so personal and specific to you. You bring heaven to earth in your own unique way. We each do. When we're comparing ourselves with others, judging anything as good, bad, right, wrong, we're in duality. And when we're in duality, we're not one with God. So remember, we talk about being one with God is the vertical, and then the horizontal is when we're in duality, when we're feeling separate from God. Because when we are in the horizontal, we're not home to receive how God wants to express through us. We're on the sidelines judging. Am I doing it right or wrong? Am I a good spiritual person or not? So it's not our job to judge the worthiness of our light or even to know if anyone's noticing. That's not up to us. St. Francis's peace poem is a gentle prayer. It touches our deepest humanity and ignites the spark of our divinity. I like the simplicity of the poem. It reminds me that all great spiritual truths are simple. When we're looking through the lens of worldly standards, life is difficult and complex with many moving parts. Simplicity always brings us back to truth. The truth is you are made in the image of God, and the truth is you are an individualized expression of God. And the truth is you came here to be who you are and share the love that you are. Your expression of love is not going to look like anyone else's. It's like a big, beautiful symphony. We're all here to play our individual parts. We're part of the whole, and when we play the instrument we're here to play, there's a harmony and a rightness feel to it. Some people have solos to play, others or part of the violin chorus. No instrument is more or less important than another. We happily play the instrument that is a match for us. It's like a church. There's musicians, bookkeeper, sound, prayer chaplain, food, support, etc. And if we're not in our right place, the symphony feels off to us. So Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. We're already an instrument of his peace. Maybe we could say, Lord, help me become more aware of the instrument I am. Help me to love and appreciate the instrument you have given me to play. Help me stop judging and comparing myself to the other instruments so I can be available for your peace to flow through me. Further down the poem, he says, for it is in giving that we receive. That is true. Giving and receiving happen simultaneously. When there is a giving, there is a receiving. However, I believe that we often leave out that we need to receive before we have something to give. It's giving and receiving is a continuous loop. Jesus says, freely ye have received, therefore freely give. He's assuming that we're aware of the source we're connected to. So for us to give freely, we have to be aware that we're constantly receiving from source. We're constantly being filled up. Because if we're not aware of that and we think it's just us here on the physical plane, we're going to feel the giving is tit for tat. Well, I gave you this, but what am I getting back? But when you realize you are so filled up with the love and guidance from source, it's overflowing what we have to give. So our topic for today is where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, in his book Revealing Word, defines doubt as, doubt is the root of weakness, mental and physical. If men have faith in themselves, in the ability of spirit within them, they become giants where they are but pygmies. And then he described understanding faith as faith that functions from principle. It is based on knowledge of truth. It is a magnetic power that draws unto us our heart's desire from the invisible spiritual substance. To have faith in God is to have the faith of God. Jesus would often say to the one he healed, your faith has healed you. The world can't heal us, but he says, your faith in source has healed you. That is where the healing comes from. Being a blessing to others is a wonderful thought. However, if you don't know that you have value to share with others, if you don't feel you are a blessing, you won't share with others. You'll withhold. That's what we do. From my years of working with people, coaching people, I learned people have a very high level of integrity. So you won't attempt to give what you feel you don't have, or you won't give if you don't feel that there's value in your giving. If you don't know you have seeds available, you'll believe you don't have anything to sow. Years ago, I was on the board of directors at Unity Marin, many years ago, and my kids were little. I was going through a really stressful time financially, and I remember talking to one of the elder women on the board, and I wasn't happy with Unity at that time, and I forget why, but I said, I'm not tithing right now. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. It just really took me aback because I thought she would judge me. You should be tithing, but she didn't. You know, and from that interaction, I could feel her faith in principle. It wasn't personal. There was nothing to judge, and it was soothing to me, and it had me look deeper. And because she didn't judge me, I didn't get defensive, and she was holding that space of faith. So we said, you know, where there is doubt, sow it with faith. I realized she was coming from faith, and therefore, instead of just reacting, it had me look deeper into what was really going on. What was I really afraid of? Where was I in scarcity? I thought that was really interesting. So before we can sow faith, we must own our faith. We must have a spiritual understanding of our oneness with God, our connection to source. We grow our faith through spiritual understanding. So the question is, do you have faith in God's plan for you? I think, it's just interesting. Do you have faith in God's plan for you? I love studying and sharing what I learn about God in a very practical way that can hopefully be useful to other people. And then this week I was thinking about, because we just finished up our class here, and it's like, I love teaching class. It is so easy. It's just easy. It's easy, it's fun, it flows. And then I thought, speaking is more challenging. It's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. I think I shouldn't be having notes, but I just can't seem to get away from that. But it doesn't have the same feel to it as teaching class. And so I was just kind of exploring that. And recently I was reading in a book that said shying away from attention is a survival mechanism. Some people were raised they had to perform to meet expectations, and mine was the opposite. My dad would criticize performers. Oh, they're such big blowhards. They have to be on stage. They always have to be on stage. So growing up in my family, performing was a bad thing. It was drawing attention to yourself was not the thing you wanted to do. My mom used to say, if you're good, people will find you. So it was never about putting yourself out there. And yet, God planted the seed of sharing and communicating within me. So I realized if I'm teaching, I have permission to talk about God because people are asking me questions. So I'm not breaking rules that I grew up with. But if I'm speaking, I'm on shaky ground because it's more of a performance. Like, who do you think you are? How come you're up there? Blah, blah, blah. So, and I remember when I heard that a lot of Unity ministers are theater majors. And it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense to me. No wonder they're so smooth. And this is their thing, So years ago, I had a radio show on Unity FM, and I was interviewing this Unity minister, and she says, I don't like it when people ask me questions. It gets me off track. I'm like, oh my God, I love when people ask me questions. I find it very challenging when you're talking and you don't know where people are. They're not interacting. It's a whole different thing. So we often feel like a broken toy. Why did God give me this desire and then not the ability to fulfill on it? We believe we can't fulfill on it because we either learned rules growing up that it's not the right way to be, or we judge and compare ourselves with others, believing we have to be different than who we are. We're not doing it right. So again, vertical is when we're hearing God's desire, inspiration, and horizontal when we're in a conversation where we're judging or diminishing ourselves. To deepen our faith, we have to deepen our spiritual understanding. There's worldly understanding and there's spiritual understanding. Living from faith means that we live from God consciousness, not worldly consciousness. I don't need permission or approval from the world to speak. God has already granted me permission by planting the seed of desire within me. Like all of us, we already have that seed. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. We first do that by deepening our faith, and we deepen our faith through spiritual understanding, not trying to reconcile ourselves to worldly rules. Understanding spiritual principles such as God planted the seed of desire within me. I can trust what I'm called to do in this moment and in all moments. With the light of faith and understanding, our doubts begin to dissolve. We sow seeds. Seeds are tiny. We're not being asked to snuff out all doubt instantaneously. It happens moment by moment. The closer we get to God, the deeper our spiritual understanding, the more we live from faith. Our next slide, where there is despair, let me sow hope. Abraham Hicks, their spiritual channelers, have an emotional guidance scale, depending upon how you're feeling. So joy, appreciation, empowerment, freedom, and love are at the top of the list, and despair at the bottom, along with fear, grief, desperation, and powerlessness. This guidance scale has to do with what your energy is attracting into your life at any particular moment, depending upon the consciousness you're living from. Joy all the way down to despair. We can't just jump from one state to another. You have to be where you are, and then you gently move to a different state. So when we're in despair, we feel hopeless. It's also the time when we feel most alone and disconnected from Source. In those moments, we're just looking for a crack of light. If our despair is due to an external circumstance. That light may come from a friend quietly being with us so we don't feel so alone. If it's late at night and we are alone and despair is coming from our thoughts, we have to reach for God. We have to reach for truth. We have to let God in. Charles Fillmore used to say, feeling after God. You know, sometimes it can feel like we're reaching in the dark, but we have to keep reaching. I remember many nights asking God, why? I don't understand. You know, sometimes it could take us years until we finally understand. And yet, when we're asking, we know we're not alone. All of us have been wronged, and all of us have wronged another. We all have things we wish we could have done different, said different, or ways we wish we had been different. But forgiveness makes us part of the human family. Before we have hope to give to others, we have to sow hope within ourselves, just a seed, just a crack to let the light in. The beauty of despair is that often when we finally cry uncle, we realize that we don't really have a choice. We have to let God in because we don't have anything else. You know, we've hit rock bottom, trying to do it alone. Despair makes us humble, and humility lets God in. So if you've been on a spiritual path for any length of time, you've continuously been planting seeds of faith and hope. If you're on this path, you're constantly in that conversation. Understanding God, source, spirit, keeps deepening our faith and hope. And even if we've just begun our spiritual path a week ago, you know more, see more, understand more than you did a week ago. Consciousness and spiritual understanding do not go backwards. Yet our limiting beliefs and judgment of ourselves has us think we're not there yet, getting there. You know, we're preparing to live. Someday we're going to have it all figured out. It doesn't work that way, moment by moment by moment, because you've always had love and value to share with others. God planted the seed of his goodness within you before you were born. It's always been there. It's been growing ever since. And your consciousness has never been this expansive. That's what I love. It goes in one direction. So you have never been this wealthy. You have never been this healthy, this loving, this secure. And you may say, well, that's not my experience. But remember, Jesus said, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. So why did he say that? He said that because we're in the habit of looking to the world, looking to appearances, believing that appearances are real, believing they define us. They don't. Your spiritual journey is your expression of God. It's not your dance with the world. It's your expression of God, what you came here to give. We're spiritual beings here to grow, expand, and love. The world's our playground, not our source. Our experiencing of living in the world, it's the effect of our relationship with God. I think sometimes we get that backwards. Our capacity for faith and hope increases day by day. You know, once we know that, we stop withholding and start sharing because we realize we are God's gift. Our divine purpose is to be available and to trust the source we're giving from, to trust the seed of desire God has planted within us. And now it's time for our meditation. Let's get comfortable. Taking a nice deep breath. Just knowing that you deserve to be here. You deserve to be you. You are perfectly designed to live your heart's desire, to share the gift you came here to give. Sowing faith where there was doubt. hope where there is despair. Moment by moment, you can trust the inspiration you are receiving. You are an instrument of God's peace, the perfect instrument for who you are here to be. So simple. Nothing to add, nothing to take away. Your part is to just be. Now, as we spend a moment in this silence, just feel the gratitude for the beautiful life that you have been given to share, to love, to express. And now when you're ready, gently bring your awareness back into the room. Thanks.